Demands for ground offensive continue, and Gaurav is in fact getting us up to speed with every single development. He's joining us live right now from Ashkelon. Gaurav, give us a sense of what really is expected in days and weeks to come as far as the global situation vis-a-vis this huge humanitarian crisis is concerned. Is that the West has thrown its weight behind Israel, and that is evident from the kind of support also that's coming, isn't it? Military support that's coming.
So the world has thrown its weight behind a democracy that's been targeted by radical terrorists of the Hamas. Point one. Point two, you're absolutely right. The Americans, they've sent their fleet into the Mediterranean. It's an aircraft carrier battle group, and this is a very formidable flotilla which has one aircraft carrier with about 100 fighter jets, electronic intelligence aircraft, helicopters, assault helicopters, support ships. There are submarines, there are frigates, there are destroyers. So it's like a huge flotilla. It's like a floating war city that the Americans have sent into the Mediterranean Sea. And this is a message that goes out to other countries in the region not to get involved. In fact, the United Arab Emirates, they've sent out a very stern warning to Bashar al-Assad of Syria not to let the Syrian-controlled territory be used. The area around the Golan Heights. Now, the Hezbollah could also launch an attack from there. Apart from the Syrian-held territory, the Lebanon, from the Lebanon border, the Hezbollah's already tried to target Israel in the Sheba Farms area. Of course, that's disputed territory. But in the Sheba Farms area, when several rockets were fired, Israel hit back and hard. One of the Israeli radar stations, a listening post, was targeted by the Hezbollah. And information is that 3 of their terrorists were neutralized. That's point one. Point two, in the south, in the north, the battle is actually, troops are going in, but for preparation to protect their territory. But when it comes to the south, preparations are on in a huge way for a ground assault. It's only a matter of time. Perhaps it appears that Israeli soldiers will move in. They have their armored personal carriers and their tanks already in place and in large numbers. And people are volunteering. Well, reservists have been called out, and 3 lakh reserve soldiers have also been, deployed in various locations for internal security, for medical support, for various other things, plus the combat elements. They are now gearing up for a huge offensive. So over the next several days and weeks, this war is likely to escalate in a huge way, given the fact that a large number of Israeli civilians are being held hostage by the Hamas, and to take them out safely, ground offensive may be required. And hundreds of trucks like this are on their way to the border carrying resources, equipment, food, military supplies for the offensive that may be required, and people are now gearing up for that offensive.
Gaurav, maybe a little too soon, but to ask this question about what Israelis are feeling about this conflict and how they hit them really from nowhere. But outside of Israel, yes, questions are being asked. What was the Israeli army doing? What was the government doing, given that this planning has been happening for months together, isn't it?
Oh, you're absolutely right on that account. This planning would have taken a lot of time, a lot of resources, financial resources, material resources, military resources, and Hamas on its own couldn't have done it. Israel is very clear. Iran is behind it, and that is why one of Israel's main efforts is to ensure that while Hamas is decimated, Hamas backers are also not in a position to create more terrorist organizations. How this will actually be done on ground is easier said than done. Considering this is a battle that's lasted a very long time. This is just the latest and perhaps the deadliest ever round, where according to some accounts there are about 800 plus, some say 900 Israeli civilians who were massacred by Hamas terrorists. There are also reports that say that this wasn't an attack. Remember, when India was hit by Pakistani Lashkar-e-Taiba terrorists, there were 10 terrorists who had come from across the border in Pakistan, and they'd also taken the sea route. This time, the assessment in Israel is at least 800 to 1,000, if not more, Hamas fighters came in Some came in through that hang glider route, some came in through the sea route, but the majority came in pickup trucks, armed to the teeth. They came in minivans, they came on motorcycles, 3 riding 1 motorcycle, and in hundreds and hundreds, wave after wave, these terrorists came and went into locality after locality, village after village, town after town, and massacred people. 260 at that rock concert itself, at that music festival itself. So right now, there is tremendous anguish and anger in Israel and demand for firm retribution, whatever the cost.
Firm retribution, which also translates to this being a prolonged war. Hamas says we are ready. Further escalation on both these sides, isn't it? Given that Iran has backed Hamas, of course, they continue to deny that. Iran has said we are not in this. And the kind of support that has come in from the West as far as support to Israel is concerned. Gaurav.
You're absolutely right. This is a very difficult situation as far as Israel is concerned, given the fact that there are hostages. Initial report were dozens of hostages. Now reports seem to indicate much more have been taken hostage, and there are little children, there are women, there are the elderly. We were listening to one account which said that, in one family, several people, so the grandparents, the mother and 2 children, so 3 generations of one family taken hostage by Hamas, and some of the members of that family said that the mother had dementia, she had her medicines, no medicines given to her. They just do not know what her condition could be. So each story that we hear about, each story that we read about, each person we interact with, each story is more horrifying than the other. Nothing prepared Israel for this, and now they say perhaps nothing has prepared Hamas for the consequences that Hamas will face. Now, how long will that take? As you ask, is this a long-run affair? Very likely, because so far there have just been aerial attacks and rocket and missile attacks that have happened. Ground troops are being amassed to be sent across. At the same time, there is an apprehension, as Hamas says, if there are more aerial attacks, each day they will take out 1 hostage. They will kill 1 hostage, and on live television. This is exactly like what the Islamic State terrorists used to do. If Hamas is doing the same or threatening to do the same, executing people on live television, because like the Islamic State, they've also been using GoPro cameras to shoot their killings inside Israeli territory, and they were not taking on combatants in every situation. They were also killing innocent civilians, the elderly women, the young children, toddlers were killed. In all of this, Israel says Hamas is no different than the Daesh, than the Islamic State terrorists.
Well, absolutely. Gaurav, since you mentioned hostages, yes, the concern is because the threat has been issued by Hamas already, that every building destroyed will be in fact responded to by a live execution that's going to be televised. That's a worry, that's a concern. How many hostages are there with, right now with Hamas, and what does Israel really plan to do to bring them out?
So Israel, again, is using both its intelligence network, its electronic intelligence, its signal intelligence apparatus, and its assets on ground. At least that's the information we've been able to glean to figure out where the hostages are. And very clearly, at least on ground, we are being told that those numbers are not in dozens. They are much, much higher. The apprehension is, while they were taken in, the hostages, they've not been kept in any one location. They've been spread out, they've been split up. Families have been split up, and apparently they've been kept in a maze of tunnels along the Gaza Strip. Some of these tunnels have been exploited by Hamas terrorists in the past to carry out terrorist attacks into Israel. And it's a very complex maze of tunnels, we are told. Now, in that complex maze of tunnels, these hostages could have been kept. How do you rescue them? If more soldiers go in, the Hamas terrorists could have rigged those tunnels with explosives. They could detonate those explosives, and not just the hostages, but even the rescue teams could be, in the line of fire and in grave danger. So these are some of the huge challenges that the Israeli defense forces, the Israeli security forces face as they prepare to mount operations, more than just air attacks, to decimate the Hamas leadership. Also, at the same time, there are intense negotiations that are also being carried out for safe rescue of the hostage, for the safe release of the hostages. But as we've seen in the past, As in the case of a soldier who'd been held captive earlier, it took half a decade, it took 5 years for the release of that soldier, in which Israel had to release a large number of Palestinians in return. So that is a long drawn affair. Right now, Israel is actually gearing up for a massive military offensive, as the Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu pointed out. Sneha.